Does God have emotions? Like the question of can God change his mind, the issue of impassibility is also one of the more intriguing philosophical questions about the nature of God that you will encounter. Although it's not of supreme importance, here I think we can provide strong logical evidence for the position that God cannot have emotions. And while at first thought, the idea of a being existing who is incapable of emotion seems to fly in the face of common sense, after you think about it more deeply, it actually makes a lot of sense. Let me explain. Is it greater, to be happy rather than sad? Is it better or greater to be pleased rather than grieved or disappointed? The answer is yes, because these are higher, greater emotions and positive states of being. The next question is, can God get better or worse? The answer is no, because he necessarily always must be perfect, never lacking and never less than perfect, but also never greater than perfect because one cannot get better than ultimate perfection. So this begs the question, if these two premises are true, which I think we have good grounds to believe they are, then how can God have emotions? I don't think he can. Also, if a being can have emotions like sadness or grief, what would prevent it from having different levels of that sadness or grief, or going completely into a depressed state? Human emotions are subject to time, space, and circumstance. God's mental state, however, appears to necessarily be unchanging and immutable. Even the fact that he has no sequence of events to his thought process is very important to note, as he knows everything all at once in the same instance. More questions along this line of reasoning are, can you have any new emotions if you already know every single thing there is to know all at once from the beginning? This is a difficult question to answer. Let's use the example of knowing your son would die in a car wreck. You are sad when you first learn it was going to happen, but you are also sad again when it actually does happen. So someone may say, just because you know everything that is going to happen, that doesn't mean that when it does happen, you are necessarily emotionless. But it also doesn't mean you necessarily have to have emotion either. It can be argued that you are only sad the second time because you are imperfect, and thus were unable to properly process the information in its entirety the first time. Unlike you, however, God is perfect and would be able to adequately and efficiently process all the information the first time. So, when it actually happens, he is not moved. Can God cry? To this we would say no, because God has no physical body. Can God experience physical pain? Also, we would again say no, because God is immaterial and lacking a physical body. However, it's worth noting that the Christian Bible expresses their God was at one time grieved to his heart, among other human emotions. The Christian's rescuing device here is to claim that these examples of God showing emotion should be interpreted as simply an anthropomorphic way of expressing his pleasure or displeasure with human events. But again, I would argue any form of pleasure or displeasure is in fact a form of emotion and thus a deviation from one's original state. Yet the true God of the universe is immutable and does not undergo alteration. God is absolutely independent of any other being, and thus it can be said in no way causally dependent, but affected by the state or actions of another would imply causal dependence. Also, for God, nothing changes, so it makes sense he would not have emotion. God knows the past, present, and future of every person, plant, and animal that ever existed on the planet. He knows every thought, every outcome, every wind speed, every ocean tide, etc. There is no cause or effect that is unknown to him. And he has known this for more than the last 200,000 eternities. Thus again, it is safe to assume he is unmoved by any new information or events when they occur or come down the pike for him. And lastly, if God does have emotions, then he can be manipulated. For example, you could purposely do something that you know would make him happy or make him angry or make him sad, etc. But we know this is logically absurd and therefore more proof and more evidence that God cannot have emotions. You can't hurt God's feeling. I'll see you soon. Until next time.